where we spotlight the changemakers and technologies leading the charge to electrify our built environment. On our podcast, we tackle the multifaceted issues facing building electrification, from space heating to water heaters, to electric cooking and beyond. On today's episode, we'll speak with two experts to discuss the future of household water heating. For this conversation, we'll sit down with Joe Wachunas and Amruta Kanolkar of the New Buildings Institute to learn about the prospect for scaling heat pump water heaters across the United States. Here's your host, Atlas Public Policy Analyst, Zach Strauss.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 8th episode of Buildings Hub Live. My name is Zach Strauss, Policy Analyst at Atlas Public Policy, and I have the pleasure of being your host today. For today's episode, we'll sit down to discuss the future of electric water heating in the United States and the prospect for scaling heat pump water heaters across the country. What is a heat pump water heater, and how can this technology decarbonize our water heating market and help us achieve our national climate goals? Stay with us today to find out. Before we jump into our discussion today, a quick note on Buildings Hub. Here at Atlas, we manage a one-stop shop data analysis tool for building sector electrification called Buildings Hub. If you're interested in heat pump market share, state policies and funding programs, the current makeup of the U.S. housing stock, federal grants, we've got you covered, and a lot more. We just launched our newest dashboard surfacing all of the data from the EIA's latest Residential Energy Consumption Survey, or RECS, where you can find state-level information across all building elements from heat pump deployment to, you guessed it, water heating across the United States. Register for our portal and check it out today. We'd love to have you join our Buildings Hub community. We've put a link here to the site below. Take a look. I think it's pretty cool. Now, for today's event, we are currently live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and we encourage our audience to send us over your questions, and we'll put them in as we go along. You can do so through our Q&A portal through our YouTube channel. We look forward to hearing from you throughout our conversation today. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our superstar water heater speakers today. We are joined by Joe Wachunas and Amruta Kanolkar of the New Buildings Institute. Welcome to the both of you, and thank you so much for being here today on Buildings Hub Live.
Thanks so much. Great to be on.
Thank you for having us, Zach.
Absolutely. So we have a lot to cover today, only about half an hour. So we're going to jump right in. So the first is going to go to Amruta. From a high-level perspective, what is your role in the building decarbonization and advanced water heating space? What do you do at New Buildings Institute? And what have you done in the past to deploy and enable the electric water heating landscape of tomorrow?
Sure. So I'll start with thank you for, first of all, having us. And I'm Amruta Kanolkar, Associate Director at New Buildings Institute. And NBI is a Portland headquartered non-profit working to improve built environments, energy and carbon performance through fundamental research, codes and policy, and market leadership. And, as part of what am I doing regarding heat pump water heater deployments? So I'm just finishing a California-wide field validation effort for an emerging technology that those are like plug-in heat pump water heaters. And as part of that, we just installed 32 120 volt heat pump water heaters throughout California. And it's a fuel switching technology. So first time ever, switching a gas or propane baseline to a heat pump. So we have some really interesting findings, and we should be wrapping up, the report should be out soon in a couple of weeks.
Awesome. Looking forward to reading that report and learning more about that change from a 240 volt to 120 volt water heater. It's an exciting development. Over to you, Joe.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Zach, and great to be with you all. Yeah, I'm Joe Wachunas, a project manager at New Buildings Institute. We're a nonprofit, and we form the backbone for this initiative called the Advanced Water Heating Initiative. Advanced Water Heating Initiative is made up of hundreds of partners, from utilities to governments to nonprofits, community-based organizations, manufacturers, all joining together to try to transform the water heating market to heat pump water heaters from the existing market, which we can get into, which is natural gas or electric resistance water heaters. So I get to facilitate a lot of conversations. We have working groups and task groups that are hard at work on this problem. For example, we have a working group on new home construction and how to get heat pump water heaters in new buildings, as well as one on connected heat pump water heaters, how they can serve as a large thermal water battery and not use electricity during periods of peak time. And I also have a heat pump water heater costume that I wear occasionally, especially on heat pump water heater day, Zach. We did our first one last year, and there's going to be a new one, another one in the fall of this year to celebrate heat pump water heaters.
When is Heat Pump Water Heater Day, Joe?
So, look, tentative date is September 21st of this year. It'll be around then, hopefully around the equinox.
Excellent. Well, looking forward to celebrating along with you. So, say with Joe, when we talk about advanced water heating options, my mind tends to immediately jump to heat pump water heaters, something we've already talked about in our conversation today. Are these technologies new? And for the uninitiated people in our audience out there, can you explain how heat pump water heaters work, what they do, how you deploy them, all sorts of those basic ideas?
Right. Great question. Well, to give you an idea, most of the country's water heating has been for the last 80 years provided by two types of technology. One is water heaters that burn natural gas. They just burn gas and create hot water, but that has a big problem with pollution and carbon emissions. And then the other type of water heater is electric resistance water heater. If you think of your toaster, that gets really hot, that's electric resistance heating. And that same technology is in a water heater and has been for decades. The heat pump water heater emerged in, we like to go back to 2009 when Energy Star first certified the heat pump water heater. And that's when the market really started picking up. And over the last 14 years, it's been growing at a good clip, 15% per year. But it's still only at 2% of water heaters out there. And so we really want a more rapid market transformation to get to decarbonized water heating. And why does a heat pump water heater provide decarbonized water heating with low or no carbon emissions? Because it uses heat pump technology. I think we're all familiar with heat pump technology. Many of us at least are using heat pumps in our home to heat our homes and cool as well. But they've also, now we've attached a heat pump to a water heater, and so it can heat water. And it looks like a typical water heater. It needs air, and it takes heat out of the surrounding air and uses that heat to heat the water. And all it does is exhaust cold air.
Very cool. It seems simple enough. Hopefully people will be able to wrap their heads around it. Going into Amruta, so let's keep talking about heat pump water heaters and how they differ from or improve upon those traditional electric water resistance heaters that Joe was mentioning, especially the ones that are tankless.
Mhm. Yeah, so heat pump water heaters are about like 3 to 4 times more energy and carbon efficient compared to a conventional water heater, which is like electric resistance that Joe just mentioned, or water heaters fire heated by gas or propane as the fuel type. So 3 to 4 times more efficient is a big deal, and especially when switching from electric resistance or fossil fuel fired water heaters, they do have substantial energy and emissions savings. So for cost savings, though, however, I want to highlight here is they have initial upfront install cost compared to a like-to-like replacement. So if you were to install a heat pump water heater instead of replace your gas electric resistance or propane water heater with a heat pump water heater, your initial upfront cost will go up, and that's where the utility incentives or the IRA tax credits will play a critical role to help this emerging technology reach the market scale. And once it reaches market scale, then the upfront cost also go down. Regarding operating cost, I wanted to highlight to the customers that you'd want to be careful when you're switching from a fossil fuel baseline to a electric resistance. Because of the rate structure, we have seen typically we have seen the operating costs go down switching to heat pump water heaters, but it all depends on the rate structure. So you should want to work with your utilities to understand what's the impact on your operating cost is before making that call.
I'll just add to that, Zach.
Yeah.
From a national, Amrit is absolutely right. Every region is different and has different utility costs. From a national perspective, I love those little yellow energy guide stickers that they place on all appliances, including water heaters. If you get a heat pump water heater, which I'm lucky enough to have done, you'll see that on a national average, it costs about $100 a year to operate a heat pump water heater, which is amazingly efficient. Gas water heaters on average nationally cost about $320 a year. And then electric resistance, that toaster technology, that's more like $450 a year. So you're talking on a national average, pretty good savings.
That's great. Let's also talk about maybe health savings. What is the health perspective? We talk a lot about gas stoves having a lot of health inequities and implications that are bad for us. What about transitioning from a gas water heater to a heat pump water heater? What might we benefit in that way? Let's go to Joe.
Oh, great. Yeah, I can start us off and then Amrita jump in. Well, there are significant savings. Most gas water heaters and furnaces are vented to the outdoors. So unlike the stoves where venting is more of a question whether people use it or have adequate venting, most of the venting happens outdoors. That said, sometimes the venting systems can break, and there have been studies showing relatively high percentages of venting systems that are not working correctly. So you will be, the heat pump water heater is part of the Electrify Everything movement, which is seeking to electrify all the systems in the house and remove combustion from the house to make cleaner indoor and outdoor air. And then I'll just add to that, the outdoor air pollution, we're seeing air quality districts starting in California, but other states as well are looking into it as well, that are starting to regulate water heating emissions outdoors. And most of that is the NOx emissions that comes from water heaters. And so we're going to be seeing over the next couple of years a phase out of combustion water heating because they produce NOx, which leads to smog and creates outdoor pollution. Amrita, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll only add there is, what is interesting is it also depends regionally, like, where your water heater is placed. While on the West Coast, majority of the water heaters are in the garages. So, but as you go into the colder region from West to East Coast, you will see majority of the water heaters are inside in typically in the indoor closets or in the basements. That's where you don't want NOx emissions or emissions in general, like CO2 emissions. So just going away from fossil fuel water heaters to heat pump water heaters is absolutely going to help with nationally, wherever your water heater is located, is going to help with indoor air quality and health concerns.
Let's stick with that. Move over to Joe. We're talking about region and geography placement of the appliance. Where are heat pump water heaters best suited for deployment? Are there parts of the home or parts of the country that would be ideal for their installation and deployment? Let's start with Joe.
Yeah, just from a broad perspective, heat pump water heaters work anywhere. I'll get into some details on that. But for example, Maine is the leading state for heat pump water heater installation, and it's a cold climate. Heat pump water heaters, because they pull that heat out of the air and then exhaust cold air, they work great in southern climates, Southeast, California, Southwest. Those are all great climates, and they can work almost anywhere in any part of the house. When you go to more northern climates, most of the time, the water heaters are either in the building envelope within the building, the home, or in the basement. And both are great spots for heat pump water, especially the basement. So we like to say a basement or garage are ideal locations for a heat pump water heater because they're either not conditioned space or semi-conditioned spaces. And so then it can exhaust that cold air, which can cool a degree or two. And it's not a problem. But I, for example, have my heat pump water heater in my utility closet in a conditioned space. And there are options there. For example, I duct mine out, or sometimes you don't even need to duct it and you just use that cold air. So they work well everywhere. But if you're in a northern climate, basements or utility closets are where you put the pump water heater.
Yeah, I will only add there is they also, as Joe mentioned earlier, they also take heat from the indoor air. So if you have waste heat, like for example, in your utility closets or closer to your laundry area, And if this is a new construction, then for builders, like, identifying location which is closer to your waste heat would be an ideal location so that you have a higher efficiency, higher COP, like coefficient of performance. So make sure that you're trying to install it for new construction, particularly in a location where you can use that waste heat. And yeah, in general, I think Joe covered everything else.
Awesome. And Joe mentioned Maine being the leader in this space. Maine is famously very cold and is famously using a lot of oil and fossil fuels to heat their spaces. Why might Maine be leading? Is it a policy reason, market, subsidies? What are we seeing happening in Maine? Let's go to Joe.
Sure. Yeah, I could gush on about Maine for a long time. They're doing incredible things across these technologies, but including heat pump water heaters. They are the number one thing that they're doing is that they are incentivizing heat pump water heaters. So we can talk about utility programs. Lots of utilities incentivize heat pump water heaters, and Maine I think has around an $800 incentive. So it brings the heat pump water heater, that upfront cost that Amrita talked about, to about parity with other types of water heaters. So that helps a lot. But they do other things, including they do targeted advertising. They say you've got a 6-hour window, because most people don't think about their water heaters only once every 13 years when it breaks. So you've got a 6-hour window to advertise a heat pump water heater on Google ad search or in an in-store display, and they do that really well. And then finally, I'll say that Maine also has a great low-income program. They install 1,000 water heaters per year at no cost to low-income households. That's an incredible number when you have about 100,000 being installed annually. 1,000 are for low-income Mainers, and they provide these heat pump water heaters at no cost. They contract with plumbers to have a fixed price installation. So they're doing lots of innovative things.
That's great to hear. It's sort of a multi-pronged approach. It's incentive, it's customer engagement, right? It's a whole host of different things happening at once to really move the market forward. So it's exciting to hear. Move back to Amrita and talk about sort of how we're going to get every state in the country moving forward to grow and adopt this technology. Because right now, market penetration for heat pump water heaters, as Joe mentioned, is about 2% of the ecosystem. So in your opinion, what are the greatest barriers to deployment of the technology, and what would most accelerate their adoption and scale them nationwide? Amrita.
Yeah. So like any other emerging technology, heat pump water heaters have technological and market barriers. So for example, like just to give you some examples, like higher upfront cost, installation complexity, because they have space requirements, ventilation and condensation requirements. The lack of, in some cases, if retrofit particularly, a lack of 240 volt electrical infrastructure. Similarly, installer and customer bias towards a conventional models. They are just so, sorry about that, but they're just so used to installing a gas or propane water heater. So it just takes them some time to change their business model. An overall lack of technology confidence and understanding of long-term cost savings and environmental benefits. So, what would take this technology to transform, increase the market adoption or bring more demand? In my opinion, a collective impact effort like what DOE just started, the National Field Validation Partnership, or even the Advanced Water Heating Initiative that Joe just introduced. A collective impact efforts like those can help all of us work on targeted efforts to remove some market barriers and help show more demand to the manufacturers, which helps then bring contractor education. You can work on workforce development or removing market barriers, and then show market demand to the manufacturers, so there are more products to the market, and that all improves, reduce the installation cost down. So it's all, I do think the collective impact efforts will be critical for more market adoption for heat pump water heaters.
I'll add two things to that, which Amrita is absolutely right. The collective impact, moving together, is crucial. And things that are happening to move us together, I think, faster are codes and standards that are moving towards pushing heat pump water heaters. This is happening at the Department of Energy level, where they're proposing new standards for water heaters that the rule hasn't been released yet, but we're hopeful and expectant that it would set an efficiency level so high that electric resistance water heaters, that toaster technology, can't meet it. And that's half of the water heaters in the country. That's 50%. So that would basically phase out electric resistance water heaters above a certain size tank towards heat pump water heaters. And then the other thing I'll say are the gas bans and the move away from fossil fuels happening all across the country are pushing towards heat pump water heaters. Oh, one last thing, incentives. The Inflation Reduction Act has incentives for heat pump water heaters. I don't know, Amrita, if you want to talk about those incentives, or
that's our next question. So let's go into it. So let's talk about that important thorny topic, is funding and incentives. So what existing federal or state incentives can average consumers take advantage of to purchase a heat pump water heater? And as you mentioned, I'm thinking tax credits, rebate programs, grants, and how will the Inflation Reduction Act or the IRA factor into this larger conversation?
Sure.
Let's start with Amrita.
Okay, so I was just going to say that yes, the Inflation Reduction Act has up to $14,000 in for income qualified customers, like for low income customers, and that will impact affordability. Of just make this technology more affordable for low income customers. I think in general, for overall, there is like 2,500 incentives for middle and high income customers. So again, that's not a silver bullet for electrification. Like, I don't think it's going to solve all the problems. It's just like, it's absolutely going to help, but it will be a game changer because it will trip the scales and increase private investment. Like, you will just see more momentum because of the funding that is coming through Inflation Reduction Act. Joe, do you want to add something?
Well, I just think it's so exciting that we have this tax credit through there is a low income portion of the Inflation Reduction Act, which Amrita talked about, and then a tax credit, of 30% for a heat pump water heater install up to $2,000. So that's exciting. If your heat pump water heater costs $3,000 with the water heater and the installation, then you'll get 30% of that. What is that? $900 back. So that brings the cost down significantly for a tax credit. And then I would just add that folks should check out Energy Star has a great rebate finder. If you just Google Energy Star rebate finder, you can find your utility rebates in your region. Lots of utilities have really great rebates. There's hundreds across the country. So that's a great way to find what your local rebates are.
So I'm hearing from y'all, it's grant programs, it's utility incentives, it's a tax credit on a federal level, and it's IRA grant rebate funding. So it's sort of a whole host or a whole sort of market approach to lowering the upfront costs and getting people in the door. It's exciting to see that roll out over the course of the next few years. Stick with Amrita here. When we talk about electrification and efficiency technologies, we often face issues of low levels of awareness and consumer knowledge about if these even exist. Are they options? So in your experience, would you say many average consumers or customers are aware that heat pump water heaters are an opportunity or an option when they build a new property, you mentioned in a new construction, or when they switch out an existing appliance? And what are the key opportunities to establish greater consumer and customer awareness?
Yeah. So, in my opinion, showing the market a value proposition for emerging technology is going to be key for electrification. And I think as consumer awareness and workforce development is going to be, critical for emerging technology adoption, like, any clean solutions adoption, like workforce development, and also consumer, contractor, builder awareness is going to be really important. And one of the ways that could happen is, showing cost effectiveness of these technologies, which takes into consideration the first cost, the installation cost, the operating cost, and not just the operating cost, but it takes into consideration the side benefits. So the additional benefits that, whether it is health or quality of air, like indoor air quality. So taking everything into consideration it impacts the return on investment. So when the consumer sees the complete picture and the return on investment, I think it does tip the scales to heat pump water heaters, or these clean solutions, like clean energy solutions. So um, it is important, like, not just to look at the first cost, install cost, and operating cost, but also non-energy benefits, which will highlight the value proposition to the consumers and the workforce.
Do you have anything to add about how we get people engaged in this transition?
Well, I think heat pump water heater costumes help a little bit. Having a day to celebrate and let people. The tough thing about water heaters is that people usually don't think about their water heaters, and but it's this appliance that's there in your closet and provides all the hot showers you need for 15 years, but you never think about it. But it's exciting to try to frame the heat pump water heater as this great climate money saving champion. I tell the story where I was trying to encourage my sister who was building a house to put in a heat pump water heater. And she said, no, I'm just going to go with the electric resistance. My plumber's not familiar with it. And I'm going to add solar panels next year to cancel out all the extra electricity that my water heater is going to use because it's the electric resistance. So we did a little calculation at NBI, and we saw that my sister would have to add an extra 4 to 9 solar panels with an average of 6 solar panels just to make up for that inefficient water heater. So getting the message out about this appliance being really efficient and a climate champion is part of the work that we all have to do.
Yep. We're out here doing it in the trenches, trying to get the word out. You mentioned this topic, so this is a great segue to our next question. Is much like car dealers here at Atlas, we work a lot on EVs and electrification. Much like car dealers serving as critical intermediaries in the sale of electric vehicles, what role do contractors, those plumbers, electricians, those tradespeople, what do they play here when interfacing with customers who are looking to make a purchase or when they're building a new home? Go to Joe.
I mean, it's huge. It's enormous. Contractors, especially plumbers for heat pump water heaters, are an enormous piece of the puzzle. And so lots of education is happening through manufacturers and through our work. It is a challenge. We won't lie. We are seeing some contractors that are specializing in heat pump water heater installations and seeing a big business from that. And then the other thing I'll mention that we're seeing HVAC contractors who are installing heat pumps for homes, also installing heat pump water heaters and creating a new business opportunity. So we see a big business opportunity for contractors who get ahead of the curve and start installing this technology.
And I know Muta mentioned a contractor training program or some sort of engagement program directly with those intermediaries, those sort of midstream stakeholders or actors would be really important. So I think that's something we should continue to talk about. One other major actor that we have not mentioned enough today, I don't think, is the utility. So what role do and will utilities play in the transition to electric water heating across the U.S. housing stock? And do you think that will play sort of a role in incentive funding, customer education, workforce training, or maybe all of the above? Let's start with Amruta.
Yeah, so utilities are going to play important role when it comes to electrification. Not only it impacts their the new market that electrification is going to produce, is going to impact utilities and their sales, electrical utility sales, but it is also going to impact, also going to be challenging in terms of their existing infrastructure. Talk about their transmission lines, their the amperage services or panels like meters. So utilities nationwide, for example, NYSERDA, BC Hydro, Southern California Edison, PG&E, Pacific Pacific Gas and Electric. So they're all looking at solutions that, where they could maybe invest in low power technologies like the one I just mentioned, like the plug-in technology, the 120-volt heat pump water heater, or even the plug-in induction cooktops. There are plug-in heat pumps available where, without going for expensive and extensive panel upgrades, customers can use the existing infrastructure, the plug point that is available next to their gas water heater or a propane water heater, and without upgrading any electrical infrastructure, they can just plug in these technologies and heat their water, heat their space, cook their meals 24/7
Mm,
without having for the utilities to upgrade their infrastructure.
mhm.
So I feel that's going to be game changing. Just advancement in these low power technologies is going to be a game changer when it comes to utility business model. And in addition to these emerging technologies, of course, they are utilities nationwide are looking at heat pump adoption overall, like heat pump water heaters, heat pumps for space heating adoption, to help with this electrification.
Thank
You
you.
want to add
So
anything?
we have reached the moment for our lightning round, which is a tradition here at Billings Hub Live. It's the sort of 90 seconds or less. What is your vision for the future of electric water heating in the United States? What developments do you imagine we should expect to see in the next 5 or 10 years? And let's start with Amruta.
Okay, so yeah, I do think, after the lighting market, which was transformed with LEDs, is now it's heat pump water heaters turn. Like, I do think, soon we will have, especially with Department of Energy and the administration investing in heat pumps, is going to help expedite the heat pump market overall. Heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, and I am also seeing like international trends all pointing into the same direction. So we should see some good deployments happening with connected heat pumps and heat pump water heaters in the near future.
Excellent. I like the idea of that this is an international movement. This is not just a silo here in the US, that there's other actors around the world at play. So it's important to think of this as a global movement and not something happening just here at home. All right, over to Joe.
Yeah, definitely echoing and plus wanting Amruta's great. It is a global movement. I would say it's not just the future of electric water heating, because half of the market is electric right now. It's the future of efficient electric water heating, and that's what you get with the heat pump. And we're going to see, I think I like to call it the perfect storm between the standards that are going to be phasing out the inefficient electric water heater and the other codes and policies that are going to be phasing out fossil fueled water heating. Everything is pointing to heat pump water heaters. We're seeing manufacturers with internal projections of 50% heat pump water heating market share by 2030 compared to 2% right now. That's dramatic growth comparable to the LED light bulb that Amrita mentioned. So it's an exciting time. We're going to be saving a lot of energy and a lot of money. So it's an exciting time to be thinking about water heating.
Excellent. I love that optimism. I like especially those evidence-based projections really showing us that it's time and things are happening, that this transition is occurring as we speak. And just a plug to everyone's mentioned, those rebates and incentives and tax credits are available. When you're filing your taxes next year, when you're looking to see if you can save money, that money is out there, and you should, as Joe mentioned, look at the Energy Star rebate and incentive saver. And I think that would be a good place to start. Well, folks, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today for Buildings Hub Live. I want to say thank you very much to both of our superstar speakers for joining us to provide their expertise and their insight. To everyone here in our live audience who participated in our discussion today. If you wish to rewatch this episode or share it with your friends or colleagues, you can find it on the Atlas YouTube page, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We encourage you to check out our Buildings Hub platform and to join our electrification community today. As I mentioned at the top of our call today, we just launched a new dashboard surfacing all of the data from the DOE's latest Residential Energy Consumption Survey, or RECS, where you can find state-level information across all building elements, including water heaters. Register for the platform today, and we'll hope to see you on it. I think it's pretty cool. We'll hope to catch you on the next episode of Buildings Hub Live. Have a great week, a wonderful rest of your Pride Month, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Buildings Hub Live. You can listen to this episode and all other installments in our podcast on the Atlas YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. If you're interested in additional content, check out our data, articles, and dashboards on Buildings Hub at atlasbuildingshub.com. Thanks for joining, and catch you next time.